I'm just going to share a few intro slides with you, and then we can jump into our content for today. So hopefully you can see my screen. Welcome to today's office hours for the Arizona Small Business Bootcamp. Hopefully many of you have attended some of our sessions so far. We're really proud to be presenting this bootcamp in partnership with some really amazing agencies across the state. We've got some representatives of some of those groups on our call today for office hours. And just really excited to be working in partnership with all of these people and many more to be bringing this bootcamp to you. So the Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective is designed to help small businesses return stronger from the COVID economic crisis. It's a statewide initiative supported by those community partners that you just saw. And it's a daily bootcamp from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. every day for at least the next 6 weeks to make sure that you've got the tools, resources, and support to plan for your business to return stronger than ever. So we've got our topics outlined for next week. On Monday, we'll be talking about what to do once you've received that PPP loan. We've talked a lot about forgiveness and tracking and want to make sure that everyone's staying organized around that. On Tuesday, we'll be talking about how to manage your employees during a crisis, whether that's communications, whether that's furloughs, that sort of thing. On Wednesday, we'll be talking specifically about the restaurant industry. Obviously, restaurants and small businesses have been hit really hard, and so this session will be delivered by our partners over at Local Arizona First and Devour to talk about if you're in that industry, how to respond. And finally, next week we'll be moving from a Monday through Wednesday content to Monday to Thursday. So on Thursday, we'll have a session on safety and how to return to work safely from guidelines from CDC, OSHA, and National Safety Council. Again, I just want to clarify, this week and last week we had office hours on Thursday and Friday. But because we've had so much great engagement and great content, we're going to be moving to content Monday through Thursday. And that Thursday session will be about safety. And we're actually going to be offering 2 sessions, one at 9 in the morning and one at 3 p.m. on how to return to work safely under the new guidelines, in case you or people that you know can't make the 9 a.m. time. So office hours, we do office hours Thursdays and Fridays. Like I said, next week, office hours will only be on Fridays. And that's an opportunity for you to get your questions answered and get support and guidance from experts in the community. Just some quick updates on PPP. Round 2, we've had over 44,000 Arizona small businesses receive funding. That puts us between round 1 and round 2 in the top 15 states of small businesses that have gotten funded. So we're really excited about that. And last we checked, there were still funds in the pot. And so if you haven't applied for PPP yet, you have questions about that, we can address those today. If you're thinking about it, would encourage you to do that as soon as possible. And finally, hopefully many of you heard at the governor's most recent press conference, there are some changes to the guidelines on businesses in Arizona. Starting tomorrow, salons, barbershops, spas will be able to open under those new safety guidelines. And then starting Monday, May 11th, restaurants will be available for dine-in, meeting new social distance safety guidelines. So we can answer questions about that as well. The ACA has a number of programs aimed at supporting businesses, both in times of crisis and more broadly. We encourage you to check out our website, azcommerce.com. We've got a specific section on COVID-19 resources, but we've got a ton of other great teams working hard on these issues like workforce, manufacturing, that sort of thing. So please be sure to check out that website. I'll post in the chat box where you can visit the specific bootcamp website to register for those sessions next week. And you can also watch past webinars and recordings from sessions we've done this week and last week as well, in case you missed any topics that you think would be interesting. So for today's office hours, we're joined by a couple guests. We've got Linda, I'm gonna mess it up, is it Ricciuti?
It's Ricciuti, like the letter Q and the letter T. Yeah, you got it. Linda
Ricciuti from ASU's Entrepreneurship Group and Gina Couillard from the SBDC at Coconino. Thank you so much for joining us. The way that these sessions typically work for everyone is that if you do have questions, you can throw them in the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen, or you can also use the chat function. And then we can start to handle those questions. While those are coming in, I'd love either Robert or Gina to give a quick update on what you're hearing from a PPP or EIDL perspective. Are companies still going for that? Has the SBA started to kind of work through some of its issues?
So I'll jump in. Again, as I mentioned in previous ones, if you did not hear, that the EIDL loan is open for agricultural businesses. The link is for those businesses is on the SBA EIDL website. For PPP, there's as of yesterday afternoon, there's still about 126 billion available, and there's a number of banks that are still doing loans. I will post in the chat window. I've heard from we've heard directly from 5 different lenders that are still doing PPP for new customers. So I'll post their information in the chat window throughout this morning's office hours.
And thank you, Robert. Linda, you were talking a little bit about your situation. You also run a small business, and some of the questions that you're seeing or experiences that you're having, I'd love to kind of share that expertise with the group on the line.
Sure, absolutely. I do have a small coffee house. I have about 20 employees, and I'm based in California, not in Arizona. Has been very interesting. I've gone through the PPP process. I do have my number. I've signed my documents, so I'm just waiting for the funding piece of things, but it does seem to be shifting and moving rapidly. So I'm still not quite sure what I'm signing up for, to be quite honest with you. And that's going to be just a moving target as I get going. Right now, I live in my coffee house is located in a tourist-based economy. We have very high transiency in terms of our employees. And so with the PPP, it's going to be very interesting to see if we can get our employees back, what we're committing to with our employees. Those are all the kind of questions that I'm struggling with. I'm working through kind of reimagining. I'm doing a lot of modeling, forecasting for cash flow and all those different pieces, just like other business owners are as well. So it's going to be an interesting journey for all of us. And I do have access to a lot more resources, I think, than most business owners because of my work with ASU in entrepreneurship and innovation. So I'm excited to share what I know and see what other questions people have.
Great, thank you, Linda. And Gina, thank you for participating. I'd love if you could share a little bit about what you're seeing at the SBDC, some of the resources that maybe some of your clients have found the most helpful, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so what we are starting to see in the last couple of weeks is that clients are finally starting to get relief in terms of the EIDL loans. And so if any of your participants have questions about how that looks, I would be happy to walk them through what our clients are seeing. Clients are usually waiting about a month before they see this funding. But once they are contacted, that process is usually pretty seamless. We're seeing a lot of luck, especially with the local banks for the PPP loan products. And so I'm happy to talk with that with anyone who's on the line.
Awesome, thank you. And I do believe we have one person on the call who, to Linda's point about receiving PPP, has experienced himself kind of what happens after and his story of getting that loan. So Randy, I believe you're on the call. I'm gonna allow you to talk quickly and would love to hear a little bit about your experience before we dive into some of the questions that are coming in. And if you are not ready and wasn't prepared to be put on the spot, that is okay too.
No, that's good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I healthcare consulting business, and we received our funding, and we've been very fortunate that we've been able to both use it to retain our folks and even use it strategically to help some folks that were terminated by other companies that are experts in the field. And I would just offer to anybody on the call that wants to reach out to me. We spend extensive time with our bank, with our accountant, with our tax planners, with our HR, and we've got a good strategy in place, we think, to use the funds the way it was intended, which is to get people a paycheck during this period, and then strategically prepare ourselves for when these funds run out and be ready to move the company forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we do have a question about PPP. I've received my PPP. I'm a real estate agent that received my funds based on past commissions, so there are no wages to document. How do I document my spending to maximize loan forgiveness? I do not file a W-2, so do not pay myself.
Mark, I'll take a stab at that. That is a really loaded question. All of us are still waiting for guidance from the SBA to determine loan forgiveness. And so without knowing specifically what the forgiveness requirements look like, it's hard for us to answer that question. If you want to get me your contact information, or if Mark, if you can facilitate that, I can escalate that to the SBA and see if I can answer that for you offline.
Awesome. Thank you, Gina. So for the person who asked that question, if you want to send us your email, Gina can follow up with you. I'm also typing in the chat window the link to register for next week's sessions if you had questions about that. And that's our kind of resource collective as well. So you can view past sessions in the archives if you missed any topics. And thank you, Paul. We just got your contact info. And Gina, that is there in the Q&A box. So Gina, Robert, and Linda, as we head into kind of this new reopen phase that's starting to happen in states across the country, how are you seeing businesses prepare for that? And what should they be thinking about as I mentioned earlier, salons and spas are about to start opening, restaurants on Monday. If we have customers on the call who are starting to think through that, what should be top of mind?
I think one of the key things that people are worrying about, both from the studies that are out there with just the feelings of consumers, is making sure that you are able to provide both for your customers and your employees a safe place, following the CDC guidelines for safety and cleanliness standards. So that people feel comfortable knowing that you're following those programs to come in and want to work. We're doing next Thursday is going to be a safety session on the boot camp, and I think that's going to be a very critical piece as your businesses, if you're planning to ramp, reopen, to help understand the things you can do, the measures you can take to provide a safe business for both employees and customers.
Absolutely. Safety is going to be top of mind. And excited to have that session. And again, that session will be at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. next week. And so if you can't make the 9 a.m., there will be an afternoon version as well, because like Robert said, that's going to be top of mind for a lot of businesses, how to keep your employees, yourself, and your customers safe. We do have a question in the chat box. So the disaster relief grant, EIDL, $1,000 per employee. Are there any details on how that is forgiven and over what time period?
I can take that one, Mark. So the EIDL advance it can be handled two ways. So number one, if you haven't applied for a PPP loan and you just applied for the EIDL loan, then the portion that you receive as the advance will be forgiven. And then the only thing that you'll owe is the remainder of the loan once you receive those documents. Now, if you do get a PPP loan, you are going to need to disclose, which we advocate all the time anyway, you are going to need to disclose to your lender that you have received that EIDL advance, because that will be reduced from the amount that can be forgiven from the PPP loan. So it's really important that you have a relationship with your banker as you move forward, that you're transparent in this process. We are still waiting for guidance on forgiveness from the SBA for the PPP loan product. So as far as details, I think we're going to start seeing that this next week. We just received a email this morning from the SBA saying that they will have that information out within the next week. So I think things will start to become a lot clearer. But right now we're just advising people that you really communicate both with your banker and then your SBA lender for the disaster loan to communicate how that will work.
Awesome. Thank you, Gina. And you did mention, we had a great session on kind of how to engage with your banker. And you mentioned kind of having that relationship. I know a lot of people were scrambling when EIDL and PPP were coming out to kind of get in front of someone. Now that those loans are being processed, what do you see as a good either cadence or process for maintaining that relationship with your banker going forward? There's going to need to be ongoing communication. What are some best practices about how to build that relationship?
I think, you know, starting this point, for those of you who already have an established relationship with your banker, then just keep those lines of communication open. But for those of you who maybe have engaged a new lender, you know, be honest and transparent about your business needs, be honest and transparent about all of the aid and relief you've received through this, and really engage your banker to be your ally. You need them in your corner always, right? But especially right now during these times.
Awesome, thank you. And a question that we see a lot that just came in: as an independent contractor, can I use my PPP to pay myself wages for April through June?
Yes, the PPP is designed to cover wages. That's the main piece of it. So for independent contractors, if you applied for a PPP and received it, it is to help pay your wages during the 8 weeks from the date that you received the funds. And from the previous question on, you don't normally have a consistent payroll or way of paying yourself, you need to track and create something so you can track on paper how you're paying yourself. So when you go to, when the final rules on the forgiveness are issued, you have some documentation to show how it was used for payroll.
Mark, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. So even though there hasn't been definitive guidance from the SBA on how these loans are going to be forgiven, what we do know is that they are going to need third-party verification of how these funds have been forgiven. So when we think about third-party verification, that means bank statements, cleared checks, your 941 reports, unemployment reports, state tax reports. If you're using any of these funds for your leases or mortgage, those statements along with cleared checks, retirement contributions, those would be statements. So what I've advised all of my clients from the very beginning is to create a file, right? And start keeping all of that information in there. And so that you are prepared as you go to ask for forgiveness. You know you're going to need this information. So keep really good, clean records so that when you do go to the bank, you have this information ready.
That's great advice. Thank you, Gina. Another question that I'm seeing that we've gotten a few times: what happens if we've applied and haven't heard back yet? Are they still processing? Is that still ongoing? Is there something that people should be doing in the meantime?
So David, you asked that question, and I'm not sure if you've applied. I don't know what product you're talking about. If you want to throw a little bit more information up in the chat, I can answer that. If you've applied for the PPP and haven't heard, then if it's been a long period of time, I can escalate that to the SBA and see where your application is for you. In terms of the EIDL loan, unfortunately, it's kind of just a sit and wait game. I know that's not what you want to hear, but that really is where the situation is. So if you let me know which product you're talking about, I can answer that a little bit better.
Looks like PPP.
Okay, and if you will let me send me your email privately, then I can follow up on that information with you, David.
Another question that's in the Q&A.
Mark, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to jump on that previous question too on the PPP. If you're working through one of the larger banks, they've been kind of slow in the process. And if you can't get a hold of anybody, if you just applied it with the bank and are waiting, try to reach back out to the bank. If they're not responding, then you may need to look at applying at another bank. And again, I'll post up here shortly a list of some of the different lenders that are still taking new customers for PPP loans. But again, from feedback I've seen is some of the larger banks are just, and it could be due to the amount of applications they received, seem to be running a little slow, and their communication has not been very good.
Yeah, Robert, this is Andy. You might want to elaborate on some of the examples we've heard also of companies that have multiple applications in for PPP. They weren't being excluded. They were just, it was kind of like a first in for them, and not getting erased out of the system if they multiple applied.
Yeah, if you apply through multiple banks, once your business has gone through the SBA system for the loan, the other lender can't do a loan for you. So it kind of automatically pulls you out from those other banks being able to process a loan. And so we've heard a lot of encouragement to apply at multiple places, especially if you've applied and you're not hearing back, and the communication from the lender that you applied with has not been very good, apply somewhere else for the PPP.
I want to add a little bit of information to that also. Your local lenders, especially during this, the community banks, and I'm not too familiar with them in the Phoenix region. Bob or Andy or Mark or one of those guys might be able to answer. But we've even had clients having great success with Cabbage and PayPal. I had a client on Friday who got funded through PayPal for the PPP within 30 hours. So just a little bit of information to follow up on that.
Gina, could you comment, do you know if that application or that company was already a PayPal customer in some way, or did they just sign up through PayPal?
They had just signed up through PayPal, and they had been waiting at one of the larger banks for quite a long time without any success, signed up through PayPal, wasn't a customer, and was funded in 30 hours. So if that's what we're seeing everywhere, that's great news for a lot of people who are really waiting on these funds.
Yeah, I think that is great news. And I think the overall message is to David and others, if you have not had success through that one vehicle, go ahead and apply again. And this idea of going through one of the online organizations too would be good.
Yeah, and I've also heard great things about Cabbage, but your local bank, so Bob or Andy, if you know, but up here in Flagstaff, it's Foothills, National Alliance, SunWest, BBVA, Compass. We've heard great things. So the smaller banks have really stepped up and shined during this crisis.
Excellent.
Thanks, Gina. Sticking with that PPP theme, there's always a question or two about, is it possible to go back and get more from PPP because you didn't kind of accurately portray how much you could be getting? So within the Q&A chat, there's someone who's a realtor, 1099 income, files as an S Corp, and they originally submitted to reflect a salary of $1K per month, not including their 1099 income. Is there a way to go back to their bank and increase the amount of PPP received?
I'll take that one. I have not heard of anyone being able to do that yet. Not to say that maybe it isn't possible, but I think that would be a question that you would need to take up with your lender to see if that is a possibility.
And I know, so a lot of these questions, rightfully so, are focused around EIDL and PPP. We had a great session on Monday around alternative sources of funding. There's some amazing community groups across Arizona. We had Community Investment Corporation. We had a group talking about crowdfunding, WeFunder, Kiva. If you are interested in those types of financing options, I'd encourage you to go back and look at our session from Monday on those alternative sources of funding. And I'm sure groups like SBDC or even Linda at the Entrepreneurship Center at ASU are seeing different types of funding outside of just your standard PPP or EIDL loans.
Absolutely. I think there's lots of people stepping up to the plate with different ways to do that. I think the more what I would encourage anyone applying for, I would encourage people to apply for federal dollars. The more federal dollars we can use first to bring into Arizona, the better. And then from that, after that, go to your community sources. So try and max out our federal relief first and get our fair share of the funding here in the state. And then once that happens, the community sources will be a great relief. You know, there's other things that happen that you can't apply PPP and EIDL funds for that happen in businesses. So when you had asked the question earlier about what to be prepared for starting up, when you're phasing your rollout, you're opening your doors, you know, there's things that you need to reach into your own pocket for. And right now things are pretty thin, but there's things to remember. If your cash flow is king right now, if you're going to be opening your doors at 25% capacity or 50% capacity, because that's what your state or your local authorities are telling you you have to do, you're going to need things like, you know, the plexiglass shields possibly, or stickers for the floors, or, you know, different things, out of pocket expenses that you're going to have to figure out how to do pretty quickly. And that's not stuff that can be, you know, charged off to any of the loans that are really strictly around payroll. So thinking about what you can spend on and what you can't, that's a great use of community resource loans, because that's money that isn't tied necessarily to specific payroll expenses, because it's not just about payroll. That's one huge piece. But when you go to open your doors and you're reimagining your business in a totally different way, you're going to find expenditures that you didn't consider before. And it's stuff you're going to have to deal with. You have to have an employee manning a door. And the way I look at my business is I need to make money from each one of my employees. That's how you stay in business. You don't make a dime off of somebody counting people in your store and stopping them at the door, right? So there's a bunch of different ways you're going to have to balance and rethink your cash flow and how you're spending your money. So that's what I think community grants would be outstanding for.
Thanks, Linda. I think that's really important. We had a great session earlier this week on managing cash flow and costs. One large area of those costs is around kind of rent and mortgage costs. And I'm wondering if anyone on the call has had partners, customers, clients share stories of either success or attempted success at being able to negotiate with their landlord or things like that.
I would say, just kind of as an aside, I own my building. I actually pay my mortgage for my building, and I went straight to my lender as my PPP bank, because it's in their best interest to help me make sure that my business succeeds, because I'm paying rent off of their loan, if that makes sense. So that's one strategy you can use if you are an owner of a building and you're paying your mortgage to a bank. Go to that bank for your PPP. And I was shocked at how quickly I got bumped up the list.
Awesome.
Mark, I wanna give some information in regards to that. So those of you who have current SBA loans, either a 7A or a 504 for your mortgage, you are granted 6 months of relief in terms of payments and interest made on your loan as part of the CARES Act. And so a lot of our businesses are using that, even if they don't have a SBA loan on their property, to negotiate with their landlord, because more than likely their landlord is getting 6 months of relief. But if you do own property and you refinance that to a SBA 7A or 504 loan before September 27th, you'll still be eligible for that 6 months of payment and interest on your loan. So for those of you that may have been looking at that anyway, that may be another source of savings for you in the next few months.
Thank you. We do have a question here. What happens if a business is domiciled in other states? Do they qualify for aid in both of those states? So once they've claimed maybe federal dollars, are they eligible for community dollars in both of those states?
I would say that that's probably going to be mandated by the way the grants are funded and the requirements of the loan funds, and it's going to be independent to the municipalities that are managing them.
I also want to take a moment. We were joined by Alejandro Lozano, also from ASU. And Alejandro, welcome. I wanted to give you an opportunity to, if you have any kind of guidance for businesses or any updates on what you're seeing out in the market, best practices, things like that. Would love to hear what you're seeing.
Hi, sorry that I was a little bit late. But hi everybody. In terms of things that I've been seeing, for example, with some of the restaurants, my wife actually works in the restaurant industry. And yeah, it's just more of like a slow rollout. I think trying to minimize the amount of people that are going to be in one space. I don't have that much information in terms of like loans or PPP, but that's something that, especially with businesses in our local community, has been kind of keeping them afloat. But that's my only add-in for right now. Thank you.
So if there are other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box or in the chat as well. We've gotten some good content in there. I'm just going to go into my FAQ here and see if there's anything else that's been coming up quite a bit. We have had some questions around timing for PPP. So people talk about that 8 weeks. We're now in May and those started in March. Could someone clarify kind of how that forgiveness timing works? And also questions around the imperative to be using that money for payroll?
So the funds do have to be used 8 weeks after they've been awarded. They are designed for 8 weeks of payroll and operating expenses in terms of your mortgage or rent and utilities. So what I've had a lot of clients doing up in Flagstaff is they've either created a separate account for their PPP funds just to kind of keep them separate and manage them. But you do need to be using those funds within that 8-week period of when they're awarded.
Awesome, thank you. And to clarify again, that's when the funds hit your bank account, that's when the 8 weeks start. And because they're payroll reasons, I know a lot of small businesses have had to furlough or terminate employees. It's not by the individual, it's by the job that you're using that PPP for. So if you can't bring back the same individual for whatever reason, it is per the job. And because there is that 8-week timeline, if you do receive that PPP loan and you're looking for forgiveness, there is a bit of a rush to get payroll back up and moving to earn that forgiveness. So if you wait 2 or 3 weeks into the 8 weeks before you're bringing people back on, that's going to go against that forgiveness. Is that correct, Gina?
Yeah, and I want to expand on that a little bit. So I've been talking to clients. I had a couple of them yesterday and they said, you know, I'm not going to be able to use all of my PPP funds. And so what does that reality look like if it happens to you? So what's going to happen is you can either return those funds, return them to your bank and not pay any interest on them, or you can keep the funds as the unforgiven portion, which will be at the rate of 1% for a term of 2 years. And so just so you know, we do know how that's going to work in terms of this forgiveness portion once we get there.
And Mark, on the question of I've made an offer and they don't want to come back, how does that impact my PPP forgiveness? In the early part of the chat window, I posted a link to the frequently asked questions. Question number 40 actually relates to that. And it states that the SBA and the Treasury are working on a ruling so that if you have a written offer for the same wage and same number of hours to someone you laid off and they choose not to come back and you have all the documentation that they chose not to come back and work for you, that you should not be impacted, or that should not impact your forgivable portion. So that is a ruling to keep an eye out for. But question number 40 on the frequently asked questions addresses that topic and gives some details on what the employer needs to do as far as making sure they have all their documentation regarding that.
Awesome. That's very helpful. Thank you. And Alejandro and Linda, one more question. So outside of PPP or idle loans, we've seen a lot of business take this time to either think about refining their business model, maybe a pivot, maybe working on their fundamentals. And I'm wondering if you've got advice for small businesses of here's where I would focus my energy and efforts from a business perspective, maybe once you've secured those federal funds, or here's an area where people are really getting into trouble, but if they spend a little time, maybe it's on their finances, maybe it's trying to go e-commerce for the first time ever. What are some valuable areas for small businesses to be spending their energy in right now that might pay dividends once this reopen commences?
That's a great question. I think, for people that I'm working with, really what I'm trying to get them to do is think differently about their current business. This is not a situation that's going to go away. I think we're going to see this coming in waves for the foreseeable future. Business can't be run the same way that you've been running it. And I think that it's going to be incredibly important for all of us business owners to reflect very seriously on what we offer and who our customer is, and going back, as you said, kind of to the basics, really redefining what your purpose is and understanding how much volume you have to do in whatever industry you're in order to stay afloat. Because as these percentages get cut back, if we can open 25%, then 50%, then 75%, then maybe 100%, all of your numbers have to shift to accommodate all of that. And there may be areas of your business that are no longer viable. And those are areas that you really need to think about purging. It's kind of redirecting, pivoting, letting go of some pieces and ramping up of others. So as this plays out, I think we'll have a better answer, a more specific answer to what areas to really focus on as we can start to see those businesses that are successfully coming back. That's going to be the challenge. And I just don't want to see people trying to open up their doors and doing the same thing that they did before, because it has changed. And I think acknowledging that is the first step to recovery for all of us. And we have to understand that there is a different way of doing business, and what can we do if it's a volume issue? How can you move more customers through your store? If it's a technical issue, how can you build better bandwidth and reach out to different types of audiences? Maybe it's a shift in the product that you're offering. So it is really going back to the very beginning and reimagining as if you didn't have a business. If I were entering the market right now and I'm interested in this area, what might it look like today? What might it look like in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? And I think if you can start to map that and really look down the road, you're going to be in a much better position to adjust to these risks and these hazards that are going to come up that we can't predict.
Linda, I really love that. This is Andy. Fantastic. We couldn't agree more with the concept. And you've just defined a great future topic for us as we start to move into the plan and return stronger phase. So you're signed up for that. Great.
Awesome. Thank you. I'd love to.
Yeah. I would also just like to double down. If you listen to what Linda was saying, I think it's super important to understand that in this tough time, this really is an opportunity to re-examine your models, re-examine your customers, re-examine your products. So, looking at it more as a, in a crisis side is one thing, but also looking at that as an opportunity for positive moving forward innovation on what you're doing with your business is super important at this stage. So we love that.
And I think we have a comment from Randy again, Bailey. Randy, I see your hand raised if you wanted to add to that. No, that's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just going to comment on the idea about changing your business model. I think a lot of folks are using, or I am using this money to pay people who I cannot engage at clients right now. Yet these people want to feel valuable, and they probably know the business better than I do. So I would just encourage folks to use those people through Zoom meetings like this when they're thinking of developing their business model. Get your team engaged in that and let them help you figure out what your future business might look like and help them feel a part of that solution. And so we have weekly calls where everyone can comment on the very questions that we've raised here, and it gives people a sense of hope and a sense of value and a sense of contribution and a feeling that they really are a part of the team. So that would be my comment about your refocusing your business, is let the people that are your business on your team help you decide that. Thank you.
I love that comment, Randy. I think you're right on that, on the mark. I think so many business owners withhold information from their employees because we have a little bit of a separation between, as the business owner and the employee. You don't always want your employees to know everything. And I think things might have just changed for many people, that this is my business, this is where we are, help me stay open, help us make this business thrive, and have those open communications. I think that's fantastic. So great comment.
I just want to add, sorry, I just wanted to add something. I think just another thing that I've kind of noticed is being flexible, like people within the workforce of small businesses being pretty flexible in, everybody has different areas of expertise. Like I've seen like some of the businesses that I'm more familiar with, like marketing people that have gone in the restaurant industry, gone back and actually worked in stores and taken more of like a management in-store role to help, and being able to be nimble, I think, as a business. And along with what Linda said, just being open and honest with employees, I think we'll get a lot of buy-in from them, because it's, it is that ownership. You care about where you work, you care about your business. So I think people will be on board and be able to help out.
Definitely, thank you. And these are exactly the types of topics that we're looking to kind of present on then in the next couple weeks here at the boot camp. So as we present new information, it's going to be really helping businesses think through these very questions about how to prepare for the future, how to return stronger, and how to be creative about our business, taking a fresh look about the changing world and how we can respond to it in our own businesses. I see one more question in the chat from Suzanne. Suzanne, I gave your contact information to Gina at SBDC. And Gina, I don't know if you saw the chat, but I think she has some questions around accounting and billing and things like that. So I just wanted to
follow up. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a comment real quick. Suzanne posted in the chat a great question just about who is a good contact for her to reach out to. The small business development centers, we've got Gina on here from Coconino. They're all over the state. So regardless of what part of the state you're in, the Small Business Development Center network is an incredibly valuable resource in our state. And it's a no-cost counseling service. It's funded by the SBA and the local community colleges. They are definitely community partners for small businesses. So if you have a small business and you're looking to help form that strategy, looking to put together a on paper business plan to move forward, definitely reach out to them. They're all phenomenal individuals. I work with them closely, and I highly recommend utilizing their services.
I'd like to follow up on that, Mark. So between my partners throughout the state, we are all hired based on our expertise. My background is in auditing. But we have experts in marketing, government contracting, just about everything. And so we have tools that will help you as your businesses create these financial models, like Linda was talking about, what kind of capacity do you need to have to survive and at what levels, and maybe create a couple different scenarios. So your SBDCs around the state would really love the opportunity to help and assist you create those plans for your businesses moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. And SBDC and ASU, where Alejandro and Linda are joining us from, have been such great partners, not just for this program, but for the community at large. And so I would highly recommend everyone on this call kind of reach out to them for additional support, because what they're providing is really impactful. I'm not seeing any additional questions. And so I think that we can go ahead and start to wrap. If anyone had any final comments that they really wanted to make, or if any of the participants had any last minute questions, happy to take those. Otherwise, I'm happy to kind of give you back a few more minutes and look forward to seeing you at next week's sessions or tomorrow's office hours. I'm going to repost the link one more time where you can register for next week and view past webinars as well. And as always, we're looking for feedback on topics that you're interested in learning more about. So as we start to sign off, I'll leave this open for a few more minutes in case you've got feedbacks on what you'd like to learn more about, topics that are of interest to you, or how we can better kind of serve your needs. So let us know in the chat window. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for being on.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.